Hey guys, what's up? It's Natalie and welcome to His Kids Online. Before we get started today, let's practice the verse of the month.
Psalm 91:2.
That's right. Come on.
This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust in him. This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust in him.
All right, guys, awesome job. I will see you next time for some more Bible in Motion.
It's so dark. I'm alone and I'm scared.
It's okay. It's okay.
Oh,
You're right here.
Courtney.
It's okay. You weren't alone. That must have been really scary, huh?
Yeah, man, that was horrifying.
I'm so sorry you went through that, Mr. Interrupter.
No, it's okay. I'm here now.
Yeah.
It's light, you're here?
There's lightness, I'm here. Well, hey, you know how you couldn't see me, but you thought you were all alone here in the dark?
Yeah, I knew that.
You were scared? You were never alone.
What?
Even though we can't physically see God, he's always with us. And he's got it. So we never have to be afraid.
Okay.
Hey, speaking of which, that reminds me of an awesome story in the Bible about a man named David, and he was not afraid. So let's take a few minutes and let's go ahead and get into worship.
Sweet, let's
All
do
right,
it.
so jump up and get loose.
Hey, this song is special. It's called God's Got It. We're in his hands, and especially for us. We're in his hands. Let me show you the moves for it. It goes like this. God's got it. Whoa, 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 whoa. Like this. God's got it. We're in his hands. Let's do it again. God's got it. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. God's got it. We're in his hands. Man, you got it. And God's got you.
Don't have to worry about my life today. I know it sounds like short my daddy's pay. Sometimes I hear the voice of things of old, but God's got me, he's in control.
I got a smile on my face today. I see my way 'cause he is the way. It sounds crazy, but understand. All things are good when it's in his hands.
God's got it. God's got it. We're in his hands. God's got it.
Okay, so to learn about this man David who was never afraid, we have to open up to the Old Testament, 1 Samuel chapter 17. So go ahead and open up if you want to follow along, because I'm going to be in here the whole time. Here we find out that there are two groups of people fighting: the Philistines, who don't believe in God, and the Israelites, who do. Now the Philistines, they have this really big soldier, and he's super scary. He comes out in these big things of armor and spears and javelins, and he's really tall. You may know him.
Whoa, wait, is like a giant like Godzilla or like King Kong?
He would be just as scary.
Oh my gosh.
But not him.
Oh,
No.
okay.
This giant's name is Goliath. And guys, we read in the scripture that he's not just tall, big, and scary. No, he's over 9 feet tall. And remember, he has all that big armor on? Hey, Mr. Interrupter, will you come back over here for a second?
Yeah.
I want to show you how tall Goliath would have been. Are you guys ready for this? So, Mr. Interrupter, how tall are you? Because you're pretty tall.
Yeah, I'm like 6'3" tall.
6'3". Okay, do you guys remember how tall I said Goliath was? Over 9 feet. So let's see. This is 6'3". This would be about as tall as Goliath would have been. And he came out with javelins and spears and armor. And he was ready to fight. Thank you, Mr. Interrupter. See, Goliath, well, that's not Goliath. That's just a mean-looking turtle. And I imagine that Goliath's face probably looked like that too. I mean, he was big and scary and mean. And if his size and his armor and his demeanor, which means the way he walked and carried himself, wasn't enough, he did this to the Israelites. Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. Now, when I say shouted and taunted, I mean he's like throwing shade. He's talking smack. He's not being nice. Why are all you coming out to fight? I am the Philistine champion, but you are only servants of Saul. Now, Saul is the king of the Israelites. And remember, the Israelites believe in God. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. And if he kills me, we'll become your slaves. But if I kill him, you guys will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. 1 Samuel 17, verses 8 through 11. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I would have been like those Israelite soldiers. I would have been terrified. I mean, just walking out to see Goliath, you would have had to look like this. And he wasn't scared at all. He was so pumped up and thought he was so good and that he would have this fight. He said, just send one man. So you can imagine the Israelite soldiers were like, and they would turn around and run in fear. Well, this went on and on and on, guys. Every day Goliath would come out and throw shade. He would taunt them and antagonize them, and they would be too fearful, too afraid to do anything. Until one day, a man named Jesse, who was back home on his farm, sent his youngest, most scrawniest son, David, to bring some food and supplies to his older, bigger brothers who were in the Israelite army. And when David gets there, he hears Goliath. He hears him saying all these things about defying their God. And he is not having it. He's not okay with it. He's ready to go fight this champion. Well, word gets back to King Saul. King Saul's like, bring me David. I want to talk to him. And David walks up to Saul and says this in 1 Samuel 17:33. Don't worry about this Philistine, Goliath. I'll go fight him.
Whoa, wait a minute. Wait. David can't do that. He's like a little boy, and Goliath's massive. And like you said, he has tons of armor, I don't think David's going to win that fight.
I know, the odds are pretty stacked against him. Even Saul says, don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since youth. But David's persistent. He's not going to take no for an answer. So Saul finally says, okay. But Saul wants to help him in this fight. So he gives him his best armor. David puts it all on. He's like, I can't fight in this. This is too heavy. I've never worn this. So he takes it all off. And he only grabs 5 little stones to go meet Goliath. Now remember, Goliath, 9 feet tall, super strong, javelins, spears. He's ready to go. David's not even wearing armor. And he's not bringing a sword or a spear. So, in verse 40 we find, he picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into his shepherd's bag. Then, armed only with his shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight Goliath. Did you guys catch that? 5 stones? That's it? That's all he's taking to go fight Goliath the giant? I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting pretty nervous for David. So, as Goliath comes out and he sees this little boy walking at him, what do you think he does? I think he's probably like, look at this kid. This is going to be a piece of cake. But David says this. In verse 45 we read, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of the heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. Today, the Lord will conquer you. So he's saying, that God that you've been talking trash about, he's showing up today. So, Goliath gets ready. He comes at him. He's going, and David picks up a stone, slings it. It hits Goliath in the forehead. And Goliath falls to the ground. David defeated Goliath. The scrawny kid defeated the giant. Now, he had every single reason to be terrified, right? He had every reason to be scared and afraid. I mean, even his older brothers in the army wouldn't go fight Goliath. Nobody would. But instead of being riddled with fear and shaken to his core, he knew that God would help him. He knew that God had it. So he wasn't afraid.
Oh, okay. So we just have to trust that God's got it. And if we trust him, even when the odds seem stacked against us, we don't have to be afraid.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So remember, guys, God's got it. You don't have to be afraid. So here in a minute, we're going to take a break and we're going to do something fun. And then we're going to come back up and wrap up.
God's got it. Don't be afraid. I get afraid when I have to work around my house, and I had to do a plumbing project, and I was trying to even things up here, but as you can see, it's a little bit lopsided. This got me thinking a little bit about David and Goliath. You know, Goliath, the giant, right? You know, the giant, and then David, just not a giant at all. And it's kind of funny because when you look at the perspective of it, of Goliath and David, where Goliath seemed to have quite a lot more going on for him when it goes into battle, and David, not so much. You wondered if we could sort of even it out just a little bit. Wait a minute. Yeah, that could be evened out. And that seems to make sense. And that's what King Saul tried to do with David. He tried to even it out a little ways by giving David a huge sword and a big, huge shield, you know, to battle Goliath's shield and sword. But what Goliath didn't realize is that David had God on his side. And God has his own way of actually evening things out or actually making things right. it's easy to tend to see things from the wrong perspective, where all the things in the world could be against us and battling against us. But you see, God works on a different principle. He gives us much more than we ever could imagine that we even have. I mean, let's face it, David had a sling and a couple of stones in a pouch and maybe a stick. We try to balance things out the way that we see things happening. God has his own way of balancing things out, where the long and the short of it seem to, well, at times, we look for a connection there. And it doesn't always work that way, because the way God solves things is always different than how we might even imagine it. So when we think that we're on the short end of it, or we're afraid because our fears are gigantic, just remember, God's got it. No need to be afraid.
So the truth of the matter is, guys, we all have Goliaths in our life. These big giants that make us shake in fear. They make us scared. But we have to remember that David wasn't. Even though everything was stacked against him, David knew that God's got it. So he wasn't afraid. And God equipped him, and he was ready to go out and face that Goliath, that giant. Now, God's probably not going to send us into battle like he did David. But he is going to equip us with the right tools, our Bible and people around us. And he's going to give us the strength to get through it. So whatever your Goliath might be, whether it's talking in front of people, or maybe trying out for a team, going to a new school, meeting new people, stepping outside of your comfort zone, know that you don't have to be afraid, because God's got it. So as we say goodbye today, I wanted to ask you guys, is there a giant that you need to give over to God? If so, what is it? And are you going to remember that God's got it? Don't be afraid. Until next time.
Don't have to worry about my life today. I know it sounds like short my dad is paid. Sometimes I hear the voice of things of old.